A biological age test can tell you that your body looks older or younger than the number on your birth certificate. But a major new study suggests that one result may not be the most important number. What may matter more is how quickly that number changes. In March 2026, researchers published a long-term study that followed 699 adults for as many as 24 years. Instead of measuring biological age only once, they repeatedly examined changes in DNA methylation, the chemical markers used by many epigenetic aging clocks. The results revealed something important. People whose biological clocks accelerated more rapidly over time faced a higher risk of death, even after researchers considered their original biological age result. In other words, knowing where your biological clock begins may be useful, but watching how it moves may reveal more about the direction your health is taking. This changes the way we should think about biological age. Most people imagine aging as a number. You are 40, 60, or 80 years old. Biological age tests promise a second number that supposedly reflects the condition of your body. A 50-year-old might receive a biological age of 43 and feel reassured. Another might receive 58 and become worried. But these numbers can create a false sense of precision. Human aging is not a single process. It is the combined result of changes in DNA, metabolism, immune function, blood vessels, organs, muscles, and the brain. Different biological clocks are built to capture different parts of this process. Some early epigenetic clocks were designed mainly to estimate chronological age. Scientists trained them to examine patterns of DNA methylation and predict how many years a person had lived. Later clocks were designed for a different purpose. Instead of simply matching birthdays, they incorporated health measurements, blood biomarkers, disease risk, or mortality. These newer clocks attempt to estimate not only how old someone is, but how vulnerable their body may be. There are also clocks that estimate the pace of aging. A result above 1 may suggest that biological changes are accumulating faster than 1 biological year for every chronological year. A result below 1 suggests a slower pace. The problem is that most studies have relied on a single sample. Imagine taking one photograph of a moving car. You might see where the vehicle is, but you cannot confidently determine whether it is moving slowly, accelerating, or preparing to stop. To measure motion, you need multiple observations over time. Biological aging may work the same way. The new study used data from the In Chianti project, a long-running investigation involving people from 2 areas in Tuscany, Italy. Researchers analyzed 1,721 blood samples collected from 699 participants. Each person had DNA methylation measured at 2 or 3 different time points. At the beginning of the study, the average participant was approximately 63 years old. Over the following years, 396 participants died. Because the researchers had repeated biological measurements and long-term survival data, they could ask 2 separate questions. Did a person's initial biological age score predict survival? And did the speed at which that score changed provide additional information? Several clocks predicted mortality when measured at the beginning. This was not surprising. Previous research has repeatedly shown that some epigenetic clocks identify people with higher risks of disease and death beyond what chronological age alone can explain. The more interesting result involved change. When researchers considered both the starting measurement and its trajectory, faster increases in several epigenetic clocks were associated with a higher mortality risk. Models combining baseline biological age with changes over time generally predicted survival more accurately than models relying on only one measurement. This suggests that biological aging is not a fixed label assigned early in life. Its trajectory may shift as health, behavior, disease, and environmental exposures change. That idea matters because 2 people could receive the same biological age result today while moving in opposite directions. Imagine 2 60-year-olds who both receive a biological age estimate of 65. The first person may have recently stopped smoking, started exercising, improved blood pressure, and lost excess abdominal fat. Their biological markers may be stabilizing or improving. The second person may have become inactive, developed diabetes, experienced chronic inflammation, and begun accumulating health problems. Their markers may be accelerating. A single test gives both people the same number. Repeated measurements could reveal completely different stories. However, this does not mean consumers should immediately begin purchasing biological age tests every few months. Epigenetic clocks remain research tools, and different clocks do not always agree. One clock may classify a person as older, while another produces a younger result. That is partly because the clocks use different DNA sites and were trained for different purposes. The original Horvath and Hannum clocks were strongly focused on chronological age. DN, Amphino age, and Grimm age were developed using health and mortality-related information. Dunedin Pace was designed to estimate how rapidly multiple biological systems were changing. These tools are not simply different brands of the same thermometer. They may be measuring overlapping but distinct parts of aging. The study itself found that some clocks performed better than others. Second-generation clocks, particularly those trained using mortality-related data, generally provided stronger survival predictions than early clocks trained mainly to estimate chronological age. This is important when interpreting online claims. A company may advertise that a customer has reversed biological age by 3 years. But without understanding the clock used, the test's reliability, normal measurement variation, and whether the change predicts better health, the number may be misleading. A small change could reflect laboratory noise. It could reflect temporary inflammation. It could be influenced by illness, medication, smoking, blood cell composition, or recent lifestyle changes. A lower score does not automatically prove that someone will live longer. The new research strengthens the case for repeated measurements, but it does not prove that deliberately changing a clock score extends life. This distinction is essential. A biomarker can predict an outcome without being the cause of that outcome. Gray hair predicts aging, but dyeing the hair does not make the body younger. Similarly, lowering an epigenetic age measurement may be meaningful only if the intervention also improves the biological systems linked to health. Researchers ultimately need randomized trials showing that a treatment slows validated aging markers and reduces disease, disability, or death. That is one reason the field is moving cautiously. Some intervention studies have reported changes in epigenetic clocks after exercise, dietary changes, calorie restriction, vitamin supplementation, or combinations of lifestyle factors. These findings are scientifically interesting, but the results often vary depending on the clock and study design. A treatment may improve one clock while leaving another unchanged. A short study may detect a molecular shift without being long enough to reveal whether participants actually remain healthier. The 2026 study also had limitations. All participants were of European ancestry and came from a specific region of Italy. The sample of 699 people was valuable because of its long follow-up, but it was not large enough to settle every question about biological aging. Participants began the study at different chronological ages. Researchers measured methylation only 2 or 3 times for each person, meaning the estimated trajectory was based on relatively few snapshots. Observational studies also cannot fully separate cause and effect. Faster epigenetic aging may contribute to worsening health, but disease processes may also accelerate the clock. Both may be influenced by another factor, such as smoking, poor cardiovascular health, chronic stress, or socioeconomic conditions. The researchers adjusted their analysis for age, sex, study location, and a cardiovascular health score that included smoking, physical activity, body mass index, cholesterol, blood pressure, blood glucose, and diet. The relationship between clock changes and mortality remained, but no statistical adjustment can remove every possible influence. Still, the findings support a more dynamic view of aging. Biological age may not be a verdict. It may be a trajectory. This raises a practical question. What could influence that trajectory? The study was not designed to prescribe an anti-aging routine, but broader evidence points to the familiar foundations of health. Avoiding smoking, staying physically active, maintaining cardiovascular fitness, controlling blood pressure and blood sugar, preserving muscle, eating a nutritious diet, and getting sufficient sleep all reduce major disease risks. These behaviors may also influence DNA methylation and other biological aging markers, although the exact relationship remains under investigation. The important point is not to chase the youngest possible test result. It is to improve the systems the test is attempting to represent. Better metabolic health matters even if a clock does not change. Stronger muscles matter even if an algorithm says you are biologically older. Lower blood pressure, improved mobility, better sleep, and reduced disease risk remain valuable outcomes on their own. In the future, repeated biological age measurements could become part of preventive medicine. A doctor might track a patient's aging trajectory the way blood pressure or cholesterol is monitored today. A rapidly accelerating clock could prompt further investigation. It might reveal that a chronic disease is developing, an organ system is under stress, or a treatment is failing to protect health. Researchers could also use these clocks to evaluate longevity therapies faster. Waiting decades to see whether a treatment extends human lifespan is impractical. A validated biomarker that responds within a few years could help identify promising interventions much earlier. But for that to happen, the clocks must become more reliable, more diverse, and more clearly connected to meaningful outcomes. Aging tests will need validation across different ethnic groups, ages, and medical conditions. Scientists must determine how often measurements should be taken and how large a change must occur before it is considered biologically important. They must also understand what each clock is actually measuring. For now, the newest evidence offers a simple lesson. One biological age result may be less like a final score and more like a single frame from a long film. It can show where you were at one moment. But to understand how you are truly aging, scientists may need to watch which direction the clock is moving.